When they released the iPhone 15 Pro, I was super curious on how this ProRes log footage would look compared to something like the S-Log footage out of the Sony a6700. Not only for the color grading, but which one would be easier to use, work with, transferring files, and most importantly, that final image quality. I mean, if you're going to spend the extra time and energy and effort to shoot and log and expose for it and learn how to use it, does it really make that much of a difference on the final export, especially when you compare to the images straight out of camera? I will shoot and log mainly when I'm doing client work because usually I'll be doing multi-cam shoots, and especially in the drastically different lighting environments, I'll need to be able to color grade my images so they match up from camera to camera. To save you some time on trying to figure out how to expose each one of these cameras while you're shooting in log, I made some basic Film Alliance conversion LUTs that you can import straight into the camera and then be able to see what your image looks like, so you won't have to rely on exposing your camera perfectly while you're shooting in log. I'll leave a link in the description for those LUTs, but I'll also show you how to expose manually if that's what you prefer. Even with that little shortcut though, you're still gonna have to spend some time on color grading and dealing with larger file sizes than if you were to just shoot straight at a camera. Here's something that I've learned over the years. LUTs are not the end of a color grade. They are just the beginning. So the very deliberate narrative arc through this video is which log profile is better in both image quality and workflow, and is it worth it? To get to that answer, we had to do some serious testing in both a controlled environment like this and in the real world when it really matters. And I'll be showing you side-by-side comparisons throughout the entire video so that you can get a good understanding of which log you like better. Here's what we're going to be covering. We're going to see what each camera profile looks like compared to the alternatives, like if we were to just shoot straight at a camera. I'm going to show you how I set up and expose both cameras and how to shoot in their log profiles. We're going to see if we can color match some of my Sony a7S III footage and pretend like we needed a B cam on set and we didn't have anything else to use. We'll shoot in the log profiles and see if we can color grade the footage to match it up to the a7S III. We're going to talk about file transfer times and file sizes, and of course I'm going to show you how I color grade both in Final Cut Pro. We're going to talk about shooting with log. Is it really worth that extra workflow and the file size? Which log profile I like better out of both of these cameras, and which one is right for you. I'll also show you how to load the LUTs into the a6700 and the 15 Pro. You will need the Blackmagic camera app in order to import LUTs into the iPhone. More on that later in the video. The stage is set, the plan is laid out, and we're ready to roll. Are you ready? Let's go. Log footage delivers a flat image that contains more detail than if you were to just shoot straight at a camera by capturing the highlights, the shadows, and giving you the most dynamic range. There is a tad of a hurdle when shooting in log. You have to have a basic understanding of how to use it and how to color grade it, so if you're anything like me, I put it on the back burner until I just couldn't anymore. When shooting straight at a camera, you get to a certain point where you can only do so much. And when I say straight at a camera, I don't mean just like opening the box and start shooting with it. I'm talking no picture profile, S-Cinetone, ITU-709, anything but S-Log. And over the years, I started developing an eye for straight out of camera footage compared to someone else's way better looking footage than what I was getting with my cameras. And when I found out that they were using the same camera that I had, I was like, all right, what am I doing wrong? I gotta get to work and figure this out. If you're a full-time YouTuber or hobbyist, S-Cinetone or straight out of camera will be just fine for you. But when you want to get to that next level and have all of your clips match up and start stylizing your footage, you're gonna have to shoot an S-Log or ProRes log out of the iPhone. So if you fit into that category, this video is for you. I know you wanted to get into the meat of the video, but we had to lay out the groundwork first. All right, we got that out of the way. Chapter 1, log versus straight out of camera. There is clearly a difference in dynamic range when we look at the side-by-side comparisons of both cameras when we compare the log footage shots to the straight out of camera shots. If you shoot straight out of camera, you're essentially letting the camera sensor and processor decide what the colors should look like. I happen to be at the point where I can spot out footage shot on a Sony, a Canon, and an iPhone when they are shot straight out of camera. But I can't tell what camera was used when it was shot and graded in log. I mean, I can with an Arri and a Red, but not these consumer cameras. Here I'm showing you side-by-side comparisons so you can see what colors the camera's sensor and processor decided what the color should look like. And some people are just fine with that. And again, if you're a hobbyist or someone who just does YouTube videos, then you should be golden. But sometimes the sensors and the processors are tested in labs and not 100% out in the real world, so that when you go out and you shoot things like the forest or even people's skin tones, things start to look off. And when you see that and recognize that, that's when you know it's time to start shooting in log. Now let's talk about how we expose both of these cameras. This could be an entire video on its own because there are so many different ways and scenarios that you can expose your camera. I mean, you could find yourself in different scenarios like low light, outside, inside, what your skin tones look like, you want to go cinematic. There's no one size fits all way to do this. Some people use histograms, some people use zebras, some people use the exposure compensation meter on the display, and that will all work. I choose to upload LUTs directly to the a6700 and the iPhone. This way I'm not guessing, and I can see exactly what the image looks like, and it makes it a lot easier to expose. I'll show you how to load LUTs into your camera later in the video, but if you're not into uploading LUTs or you just don't have the time or resource, I'll also show you how to expose directly out of camera. I've used this method in real-world situations and client work, and it's never failed me. If you want to get a really in-depth and into the nitty-gritty of how to expose your a6700 with S-Log3, then check out Jason Herman's video where he goes into a deep dive and tackles all those little intricacies for the different ways to shoot. I'll leave that video in the description. For now, I'll just show you a quick workflow that I do, and it seems to give me great results. Then I'll go into the iPhone 15 Pro. I actually forgot how I do this, so I'm gonna use my a6700 as I talk. The first thing you do is you go to the menu system inside your a6700. You wanna make sure that your camera is selected on this mode dial. Then you go to the second tab, you go to image quality and recording, and you go down to log shooting setting and turn log shooting on. For the a6700, I make sure that my exposure compensation reads between -7 and 0. I'll set my ISO and shutter speed and then just adjust my aperture or throw an ND filter on to make sure that I'm hovering between -7 and 0. That's literally it. I've used that method for an entire wedding and everything just looked great. I'll also make sure that my ISO never goes above 800, which is one of the 2 native ISOs on the a6700. If I'm in really low light, I'll take it up to 2500, but I try to keep it steady right at 800 while I'm shooting in log. And then I'll just use the aperture to make sure that I'm hovering between -7 and 0. Also, anytime you're shooting in S-Log3, if you custom white balance, that will make a world of difference. Once I started doing that, all of my log footage started to match up a lot closer than when I was just going auto white balance. And when you go from scene to scene, the shots seem to keep that consistent aesthetic look that you might see in other people's videos. Here's a pro tip: custom white balance in drastically different lighting environments. As you change drastically in lighting environments, you custom white balance. And the same thing with the iPhone. When I'm shooting in log, I underexpose by 1 stop. When using cameras from the past, like my a7S III or other of these Sony cameras that I've had, the rule of thumb has always been to just overexpose by 2 stops or 1.7 and try to figure out where that sweet spot is for each camera. But these cameras that I've been using lately with the a6700 and the iPhone 15 Pro, you almost want your exposure to be at that 0.0 or under, -1 for the iPhone. Because when I overexpose the iPhone or the a6700, it's very difficult to recover the highlights. So underexpose by a tad on the a6700 and a full stop with the iPhone. If you're using the native camera app on the iPhone, the way that you underexpose by 1 stop is super simple, and I'll show you how I'm doing it right now on the screen. Now, if you want a simpler approach where you can actually monitor what your footage is going to look like rather than seeing it all look really washed out on your screen, now it's time to upload LUTs to your camera, and we're going to cover that in the next chapter. But before we do that, now that you've exposed your camera properly, you've got your shots, now it's time to edit. And anytime I'm editing anything like this headshot or a client headshot, I first throw all of my footage through Timebolt. And that brings us to today's sponsorship, Timebolt. Let me show you what I mean. First of all, I was a user of Timebolt before we even started this collaboration, so this sponsorship is very organic. Timebolt has single-handedly saved me so much time in my editing process, and when you put out as much creative content as I try to do, then you try to come up with ways to make your workflow more efficient. Check this out. You drag your headshot into Timebolt, and it automatically removes all of the silent parts between your sentences, so you could literally go through your entire timeline and start popping in B-roll. And if that's not enough, Timebolt has its own editor that can add chapters embedded into the videos. So the videos that you upload to YouTube will automatically be pre-timestamped. There are so many shortcuts that you can use that Final Cut Pro doesn't even offer. But if you do still use Final Cut Pro, you can export FCP XML files right into Final Cut Pro, which are still fully editable clips, so you don't have to rely on anything being baked in. And I keep on getting astonished how Timebolt keeps on coming out with unprecedented updates. You guys gotta check them out. Alright, so if you're ready to start editing faster, then I'm going to leave a 20% discount link in the description. I promise you, you will thank me later. Now let's get back to our video. Alright, you've stayed here this long. That means you're interested in how to import LUTs on both the a6700 and the iPhone 15 Pro. The main reason why we upload LUTs to our cameras is so that we can monitor what our footage potentially might look like in a Rec. 709 color space rather than seeing it all washed out on the display. You won't bake in your colors, you're just using it as a monitoring LUT. You will still get that log footage in a non-destructive way when you go to color grade it on your computer. You can still take that LUT that you've uploaded to your camera and drop it into your timeline on whatever video editing software you're using so that you're getting the same identical look that you were on the camera to your computer. Like I said at the beginning of the video, LUTs are not the end of a grade, they're actually just the beginning. So whenever I drop a LUT in, drag my color wheels above it, and then color grade it a little bit more to get it to where I want it. There is somewhat of a hack to be able to bake the LUT into your a6700's footage, and the way you do that is you do it through Picture Profile 11. But I wasn't getting very good results, and I also would caution you against baking in anything into your footage. You want to shoot it and have the most room to grade once you get to post. You don't want anything baked in because that's why you're using log footage. For the a6700, you can either connect your a6700 to your computer and transfer the LUT onto your camera, or put the LUT onto an SD card and then import it into your camera. If you want to transfer the LUT via cable, you connect the camera to the computer and then find the camera. You go to Folder, Private, Sony, Pro, LUT, and then paste that LUT into the folder. I will leave directions in the description in case you want to be able to see it and go step by step. Now that the LUT is on your SD card, you're going to need to import it into the camera. To do this, you're going to go to Menu, Exposure Color, Color Tone, then Manage User LUTs, select Import Edit, go to one of your user LUTs, and then select the LUT that you want to import and press OK. I created two LUTs for the a6700, one for outdoors and one for low light, so you could easily go back and forth. And if you picked up both of those LUTs, you could probably put them in user 1 and user 2, so you can easily switch back and forth. I'd be careful on purchasing just anybody's LUTs online and expecting to upload it to the a6700 as a monitoring LUT, because you're going to need a 33-point LUT, because the a6700 is only capable of handling 33-point LUTs. Just something to think about. For the iPhone, you will need to download the Blackmagic Camera app because it gives the iPhone the capabilities of importing LUTs. After you download the app, you need to take these steps. If you downloaded the LUT from my site, then you'll be able to just find it under your downloads folder on your iPhone. Or you can airdrop the LUT from your computer to your iPhone, provided that you have an Apple computer. Once you downloaded the LUT, you go to your Blackmagic Camera app, go to LUT selection, and then load LUT. I had to download the Files app on my iPhone in order for me to be able to find it, but once I found it, it was no problem just clicking on it and uploading it. Now, when you upload the LUT to your Blackmagic Camera app, that's the only app that you can use if you want to be able to preview that LUT. If you're using the native camera app out of the iPhone 15 Pro, then you won't be able to import LUTs. Just something to know about. But I wouldn't worry too much about that because the Blackmagic Camera app really opens up way more creative freedom when using the iPhone 15 Pro to shoot any type of video than the native camera app out of the iPhone. So even if you don't upload any LUTs, I still recommend getting that Blackmagic Camera app, but I'm sure you know about that by now. Now that you've gone out and you've got a bunch of S-Log footage on your a6700 or your ProRes log footage on your iPhone, it's time to transfer those images over to your computer so that you can edit them and color grade them. You can use a USB-C cord for both of these cameras and just transfer your files that way through the wire, or you can take the SD card out of your a6700 and plug it into your computer and drag your files on that way, or you can airdrop your footage from your iPhone to the computer, but that does take a little bit more time, so I figured it would be worth throwing up this test on the screen so you could see what I was getting when I did all 4 of those different routes. You could also use Bluetooth, but I tend to go the more traditional route. You can also record externally when you're using the iPhone 15 Pro, which makes it a lot easier to transfer your files from an SSD like this to your computer rather than trying to airdrop it with your iPhone. For both the a6700 and the iPhone, you can use the Film Alliance LUTs I created to get your footage back to that Rec. 709 regular looking color space in Final Cut Pro. And the way you do that is you drag your custom LUT effect onto the clip and then you import the LUT. Then drag your color wheel above the custom LUT and give it the style that you want. And that's how I color grade all of my footage. It makes it fast and easy. Maybe not the best or most technical, but it definitely gets the job done and gets me the best dynamic range out of my cameras. When you import your iPhone 15 Pro footage into Final Cut Pro, it automatically applies that Apple log transform LUT, which I'm not a huge fan of. But if you go to the inspector window in Final Cut Pro, and then you go down and you change the selection from basic to general, you will see camera LUT. And then the default when using the log footage is the Apple log. It automatically applies that footage. All you have to do is unclick it and choose none, and now your footage is back to that log profile, and now you can take the steps that we talked about before. If you don't have a LUT and you want to just go straight into the manual color grade of both log footage from these cameras, then the easiest way to do that is you pull up your color wheels, and in that case I would color grade my footage in this order. I go saturation, contrast, highlights, and then midtones. And then I just continually tweak it, and then I'll go work on another clip and come back and tweak it a little more and go back and forth like that until I'm good. As long as you get the skin tones correct, everything else should look basically fine. I use the Luma waveform, and I never color grade my footage to go below 0 where I'm crushing the blacks, or even above 75, because I don't want to get too close to that 100 mark where my lights or my highlights would blow out. Unless there's like a window or something and you're just gonna have to blow it out because you want everything inside to look properly exposed. But the body of the grade is somewhere between 0 and 75. I am not a colorist, but I have used log footage on professional work, and as long as you get the skin tones right, then you'll be good to go. Coincidentally, I also spent an evening talking with a pro colorist, Kevin Brown, on the basics and fundamentals of color grading, and that's how he developed his workflow, and that's what he told me, I think, and so that's the method that I use. I'm not gonna go super depth into color grading on this video because really this video is just about which camera's log footage you like better, the a6700 or the iPhone. But if you would like for me to do a deep dive into color grading and really go and show you how I do it when I get into those little intricacies, then let me know and I'll make a video for that. Shooting with log is worth the extra workflow and the file size as long as you are intentionally shooting. Don't just go out and shoot this stuff like a fire hydrant and come home and just have a massive workload. It really forces you to make sure your frame is right, your lighting is right, your camera is well exposed before you even press record. Sometimes I'll even do a practice shot before I press record because I know the file sizes add up so fast. You have to be careful about casually using these profiles. They're pro profiles, so you need to be able to use them and respect them for what they are. The file sizes are extra work, and the grading will take a toll on you if you're not careful. But if you want the most out of your cameras, then it's definitely the way to go. For client work, I much prefer log because even though I'll have two different cameras that are set up and everything looks good in the display of the camera, when I get home I'll notice something was off, and I can easily fix that if I shot in log using the color wheels in Final Cut Pro. For YouTube or hobby stuff, I'm just gonna shoot straight out of camera in Cine 2 or S-Cinetone, or even sometimes no picture profile at all, because it makes it a lot easier and like 5 less steps that I have to do in order to just edit a video like this one. To give you an example, I'm using the A7S III to shoot this headshot, and I'm shooting it in S-Cinetone because it's a YouTube video, and I don't want to spend a ton of time color grading a headshot like this. The log profile I prefer out of both of these cameras in both look and workflow is by far the a6700. The file sizes are a lot smaller, they're easier to color grade because there's more information to grade, mainly due to the larger sensor size, and also the transfer workflow is a lot easier and less problematic. I tend to see a magenta orangish look with the Sony log footage, where I noticed that the iPhone 15 Pro produces almost like a digital or plasticky look, and there's really not much you can do with that, and it's mainly because of the smaller sensor size. But both are small issues compared to the larger picture, and both log profiles definitely are better than shooting straight at a camera. So please tell me which one of these two cameras log profile you liked better and why, because I would be super interested to know. I'm Joe with the Film Alliance. Thanks for watching, and until the next one, have a nice week.